Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you were randomly gifted powers? Powers that give you control over gravity? Do you know what you would do? Welcome to the Comicstorian Full Story channel, where we combine collections of Comicstorian complete stories to give you a long audio drama to enjoy on the go, at home, or wherever. Radiant Black is an independent comic book written by Kyle Higgins and was one of Benny's top indie comics. So, let's jump on in to Radiant Black Volumes 1 and 2.
Nathan stares at his phone in dismay, looking at the wild difference between how much money he has versus how much he owes. And he sits in his car listening to the bank representative explain to him why they can't grant him his loan due to his debt. I know, that's why I need the loan, he tries to explain, but they tell him that they can't help him, and they hang up. He pauses for a moment before breaking down. The car door opens. "Sorry to keep you waiting. We can call another ride," the man says as he gets in. But Nathan shakes his head and starts driving them wherever they need to go. No, it's fine. Everything's fine," he says. 1 week goes by with Nathan unloading his boxes from the car, moving them back into his parents' house in Lockport, Illinois. His mom is excited to have him home, and his father just happy that he's finally admitted that he can't make it as a writer. "Henry, no," his mother says, looking at her husband sharply. She puts a hand on Nathan's shoulder. "You're a writer. You have been your whole life. That's not going to change," she tells him, and she pulls him into a hug, but they're both interrupted by a voice calling out to them. "The Great White Hope returns, fresh off conquering all of the white whales," Marshall shouts as he runs up, mixing up his metaphor. He greets Nathan's parents, informing them that he is taking their son out for the night. "Tonight, you and me, just like old times. I want to hear all about the cool stuff Mr. Big Time Writer has going on," he says with a smile to his friend. That night at the bar, Marshall is shocked by how much debt Nathan has. And Nathan nods his head, looking down into his beer, explaining that his novel is based off of one of his short stories, and that his agent is waiting for it and can get him a big deal. In the meantime, though, things have gotten pretty tight, Nathan admits. Marshall asks him if his parents are going to help, but he explains that they don't know about his money issues. Marshall explains to his friend that they just need to listen to his ideas, and they can both toast to another beer. So later, as the two of them are stumbling out of the bar, very drunk, Marshall reaches to unlock his car door, but Nathan stops him, staring up as the strange object floats before them. "What the hell is that?" Marshall gasps, and they cross the parking lot, finding the strange light floating over the train tracks. "No idea," Nathan admits, but Marshall nods. "Well, the fact that we both see it, that's a good idea," he slurs, and Marshall stares at it, looking at it from various angles. "This is so weird. It's like a mini black hole or something," he says, but Nathan shakes his head, reaching out for it. "That's impossible. It's gotta be a trick of the light," he whispers, and his fingers brush it with energy crackling around them. The light overtakes him and he begins to change. Marshall stumbles back as Nathan now stands before him in a new costume, energy pulsing off of him. And Nathan begins to freak out, holding his phone so that he can see himself. "I think I gotta throw up," he hisses and breathes quickly, leaning over and vomiting, the liquid coming out of his helmet as if it wasn't there. "Oh my god, you don't have a mouth! How are you even doing that without a mouth?" Marshall shouts, but they're interrupted as two cops begin to walk towards them, ordering them to get off the tracks. Marshall begins to get snappy with them, telling them to buzz off, but Nathan looks up, seeing a train approaching them all from the distance. He tries to get everyone's attention, but Marshall and the cops are now arguing, and the train is getting closer. Everyone finally looks up as the train whistles at them, but a light suddenly surrounds the cops and the train, lifting everything into the air. Nathan and Marshall stare in shock as everything continues to float, with the cops shouting to let them down. Marshall turns to Nathan. "Can you fly? I really hope this means you can fly," he says, and in moments, they're flying through the air with Marshall smiling as he stares at everything below them. As they get away, the cops in the train slowly begin to lower back to the ground. "This is officially the craziest thing I've ever seen," Marshall says as the pair finally land on the grain silo. But Nathan isn't listening, trying desperately to get the helmet off of his head. All right, let's calm down and solve this problem," Marshall tells him as Nathan becomes more desperate. "I'm trying to stay calm, but the thing won't come off," Nathan shouts, and Marshall reaches out as the energy begins to crack off of Nathan, reminding him to calm down or he might explode or something. Breathe, he shouts, and Nathan finally begins to calm down. Marshall suggests that he merely think about lifting the helmet off, like he did with the train. Nathan pauses for a moment, and the helmet shifts and disappears. The two of them talk for a few moments, with Marshall already beginning to scheme about the ways that they can use Nathan's newfound powers. But Nathan feels down, reminding him that he seems to screw everything up. "Hey, you're not going to screw this up. I won't let you," Marshall explains, putting his hand on his friend's shoulder. And who knows, maybe this will help with the writing thing too. Meanwhile, over in Chicago, a bank wall explodes, and from the destruction steps the robber, clad in the same suit as Nathan, but in red. Energy crackles as they step forward, carrying 2 bags of money. The next morning, Nathan returns home to find his father waiting for him. "Ah, good, you're still alive. Your mother and I were taking bets," he says, and his father offers him some oatmeal, explaining that he's up for a morning walk with his group. They sit down at the table, with his father asking if Marshall has given him any leads on jobs. Nathan isn't happy about the question, and the two begin to eat their oatmeal, but his father finally looks up. "When you called and said you had to come back, are you all right, Nathan?" his father asks, and Nathan nods, telling him that something amazing has happened. "Any idea what it pays?" his father asks, but Nathan explains that it doesn't pay. "No source of income," his father sighs, and Nathan begins to get angry with his dad, but the man suggests that he continue to drive for that company. "It's money, isn't it?" his father asks. But Nathan gets sick of his father's advice and storms out of the kitchen. At his job, Marshall is trying to help a customer pick out a movie when the cops from last night walk in. He's stunned that they were able to find him, but over with Nathan, he's sleeping, the strange images appearing in the darkness of his mind. When he wakes up, he's now floating above his bed, with a strange ball of light floating next to him. He reaches out to touch it, and it disappears, with a knock at his door bringing him to the front. It's there that he discovers Marshall with the cops. "Hey, Nathan," they say. The young men are surprised that the cops found them. "You spent the night at the bar literally around the corner from where we found you," they explain. His mother comes walking in, asking what's going on, but the cops smile. "Your son didn't tell you. Last night outside of Embers, Nathan helped resolve a tense situation. Some drunk jerk who wouldn't get off the train tracks," they explain, and Nathan's mother heads inside, happy that her son was helping. And with that, the cops finally explain why they're there. "Are you working with the other one?" they ask, but Nathan doesn't understand, and they show him footage from Chicago of a red individual who's been robbing banks. He stares at the phone in shock. "This is the first time I'm hearing about any of this. I thought I was the only one." And the cops nod, accepting his answer, suggesting that if he works with them, he could really help the community. "And get you guys a promotion," Marshall whispers, but Nathan manages to stop the argument by stepping forward. "Last night, that was literally the first time I've ever done something like that. I don't even know how I did it. I'm still figuring things out," he tells the cops, who nod and head off, telling Nathan to think about their suggestion. Afterwards, Nathan and Marshall sit and watch the footage on their phones, with Nathan admitting that he still doesn't know about his powers and thinks that the red guy might know, except that Chicago is a big city. "How the hell are we gonna find him?" Marshall asks, and Nathan looks at him smiling. "I think I have a crazy idea." So a day passes in Chicago with Nathan driving for driver, asking questions and trying to get the location of the red guy. Towards the end of the day, he hears something about a junkyard where the guy's been spotted. So as the nights begin to fall, he heads towards the junkyard. "All right, here we go," he whispers, energy crackling around him as he begins to transform, appearing in costume. He heads into the junkyard where he finds the red guy holding energy over his head. Energy glowing around them both. "All right, I have no idea what you're doing, but man, it sure does look cool," Nathan says as he walks up and the red guy whirls around. "I'm guessing you found your black hole too, which I have more questions about. But before we get to that, is robbing banks the smartest thing to be doing with our newfound powers? I mean, I found you. How long before the cops do?" Red moves fast, punching him hard in the face, sending him flying through the air, when with that he slams into the ground in a nearby construction site. "You're going to show up here and threaten me with the police?" Red asks as they fly in, Nathan throwing up his hands, trying to tell them that he's just figuring things out. But he sends an energy wave out that throws them through a wall, and a car comes flying at him. It slams him hard into the ground, and Red is there again, hitting him again and again until his helmet cracks. Red then turns, walking away from the fight, and Nathan quickly comes to, rushing after them to discover that Red took his car. As Red drives away, they look in the side mirror and are shocked to see Nathan flying alongside. "Oh, hey, me again. So sorry, I think we got off to the wrong foot here. I could definitely stay out of your hair, but I'm gonna need my car back," he shouts to Red. But Red sideswipes him, aiming for the guardrail, and then dives out of the car as it goes over the edge. "No!" Nathan shouts, throwing his hands up, stopping the car with his energy, making it float. He turns as Red flees, using his powers to pull back on the bags of money. "Hey, that previous offer of staying out of your hair? Definitely rescinded on account of you drove my car off the bridge," He shouts in energy, and Red tries to pull back on the bags, but the energy whips out, knocking Red away. Nathan turns back to his car, starting to pull it back up and put it back on the road with his powers. Afterwards, breathing heavily as he checks the bags and finds that they are full of money. He looks at it in surprise, holding up the stacks of bills, but he finally sighs. It's a short time later that the detectives in charge of the robbery scene look up to see the bags floating down to them with a note taped to the side. "I think you lost this." The next day, Nathan is in the kitchen when his dad comes down. He's excited because it's his writing day, and his father smiles, hoping that it will be a promising day. But most of the morning passes and Nathan has nothing. He heads up to his room trying to concentrate, but he just starts to look at videos online. More time passes and he just stares at the blinking line on his document, blinking in front of a blank page, and still nothing. Strange images begin to appear in his mind as he tries to concentrate. Strange symbols that seem to condense into English. Radiant. Finally, he gives up on the writing and heads to Marshall's video store, where his friend has been working on names for his superhero persona. "I'm trying to come up with a great superhero name for you. None of them really have that pop factor yet, though, but we'll get there," he says, showing him the doodles. "Sorry, how am I a superhero?" Nathan asks, but Marshall merely points out the suit and the powers. "You even turned down free and clear bank robbery money," he notes, and Nathan finally gives in. "What about something with radiant?" Nathan finally suggests, and Marshall ponders on it for a moment, checking his phone and finally looking up at Nathan. "Ready? Radiant black," he says with a smile. Nathan ponders it for a moment. It's no Batman, he notes, and Marshall continues to push for the name, with Nathan finally agreeing to think about it. "I already registered the social," Marshall says as he holds up his phone, and Nathan starts to get mad, but Marshall reminds him that they need to take control of his narrative before someone else does. Nathan finally puts down the phone and heads for the exit. "I'm done with this, I got pages to write." "Sending you the login now!" Marshall calls after him, and Nathan tries to head to the bar to write, but still nothing comes. It's on his second beer that he finally looks up, an idea popping into his mind, that his character doesn't recognize her own life anymore. Later, he's sitting on his bed, typing away the laptop, unaware that he is writing in the strange new language that has been appearing in his dreams. But a strange noise makes him look up, just as the roof explodes inward, throwing him to the ground. He looks up to see radiant black above him, but now with a sweet cape. The costumed man grabs him by the shirt, flying him into the air, speaking to him in the strange language. Nathan has no idea what's going on. "Who are you?" he asks, and the helmet disappears to reveal Nathan's face, but with a beard. "I am the you that you will never be, Nathan. Worth breathing," he says with an evil smile before dropping Nathan out of the sky. He screams as he's plummeting to the earth, and then he snaps awake in his bed, his laptop falling out of his lap. He looks up at the empty page with nothing to show for an entire day. He looks at his phone, realizing that someone has tagged him, complaining about how they have a flat tire and could use a superhero's help. So, the snow falls heavily from the sky as Nathan locates the family, landing next to their car and offering to help. "Don't you have anything better to do?" the young son asks, and Nathan looks at him sheepishly. "Would you believe me if I said no?" he asks. However, it becomes quickly apparent that Nathan has no idea how to change a tire. Finally looks up at him. Fine, where are you all headed?" he asks. So they climb back into the car as Nathan explains that just because he's a superhero doesn't mean he knows how to change a tire. And then he lifts the car, flying them to their destination. At the end of the day, Nathan falls into his bed with a sigh. "So much for writing," he whispers in his room, closing his eyes. But that's when an idea finally reaches him and he sits back up, typing away at the laptop until early morning, where his father finds him. "Glad it was a productive day," his father calls as he heads into the kitchen, and Nathan smiles. "Me too. This time." Nathan is dreaming again, strange images and lights floating around him that he can hear in a strange language, but he can't understand it. And it begins to shift, the symbols forming words. "Hello, Nathan. Welcome to existence," the voice calls, and Nathan looks up as a strange alien robot leans over him. Marshall is sitting in his apartment when his phone buzzes. He checks the text. "Need to practice with these powers. Any interest?" is the text that Nathan sent. In a short amount of time, the two are standing in the snow-covered woods, with Marshall's action figures lined up on a stump. He points at them, noting that since they've seen Nathan create energy waves, it is possible that he can do something if he focuses. Nathan isn't too sure, but gives it a shot, holding out his hand and sending a blast of energy that rips the action figures to shreds. "Hey, that's not awful," Marshall says with joy. He sets up another line, questioning what made Nathan want to practice. "I don't know, just thinking about everything, like, these powers had to come from somewhere, right? What happens when that somewhere comes looking for them? Maybe the red one is a part of it all. Nathan explains, and he pauses for a moment before telling Marshall about his dreams, with the strange images in his head and how he's starting to understand a language and symbols that he's never known before. Marshall nods, telling Nathan that he should try a bigger blast. I think you need to get angry, telling Nathan that he has to picture something that pisses him off. Nathan isn't so sure, but Marshall reminds him that his ex would still be around if he knew how to satisfy her. Nathan snaps, sending out a massive blast that destroys the action figures and the stump. Whoa, that was dope! With practice done, the two friends head off to enjoy some beer and movies. That night, the dreams come again, with Nathan standing before the alien robot and the creature explaining that they have entered a partnership, that their connection is permanent, and that war draws near, something that could kill their entire planet. To die is to lose everything. Will you do all that is required to save your species? Will you take his life? The two friends walk down the street with their movie snacks, with Nathan asking Marshall what he would do if he had gotten superpowers. Marshall smiles, explaining that he has 100 ideas of what he would do. At least 80 of them involve me getting crazy rich, he says, and Marshall looks at his friend, reminding him that he is never an idea guy. Could you be doing more? Should you be doing more? He asks, but the conversation is interrupted when something falls out of the sky, cracking the pavement, sending them to the ground. Hello, Nathan, Red says as they step out of the destruction. What a nice hometown you have, Red says as Red is grabbing him by the shirt, throwing him through the air. Nathan transforms mid-toss, becoming radiant black and flipping to a landing. Red looks up to see Marshall is filming them. Oh, dude, you're in for it now. Also, don't worry, I'm shooting video. You can watch your ass get beat down in 120 frames per second, Marshall calls out, but Red reaches out, taking the phone, cracking it. Now run, or else I'll absorb your skin and let your muscles and fat spill out, Red says, but Black grabs Red with energy, tossing them into a nearby building. He turns to Marshall as he flies after them. Get inside and stay off the streets, he shouts to Marshall. He lands on the building, but Red is there, grabbing him and throwing him through the 3 stories below, and they land in the bar below. I know who you are, Nathan. I know where you live. Believe me when I tell you, I can get to you anytime. I can get to them. I will hurt you, Red warns. But anger fills Nathan, and he hits Red with a powerful blast, knocking them to their feet. Red looks up at him in shock. Her helmet cracked, revealing her worried eyes. But Nathan sees the fear in her eyes and turns away. Don't you ever come back here. Ever again. Red gets up, shooting a blast of energy at him as he walks away, and he whirls, shooting her with his own. His blast knocking her away, with the building beginning to rumble around them. He holds out his hands, trying to stabilize the building. Hold something, now! He shouts at Red, and he shouts for everyone to get out of the building as it begins to crumble. There's about to be nothing to hold up, Red shouts. And Nathan turns, hitting her and the others with a push of energy that sends them out of the building, with everything coming down on top of him as he does. Marshall rushes forward, screaming for his friend as he digs through the rubble, pulling him out, cradling his body. The alien asks if Nathan will do everything that he needs to. Will you take his life? It asks. Nathan turns away for a moment and stares at the alien solemnly. Then your world and you will die, it warns. Marshall is screaming for help. He turns back to Nathan and watches as the small ball of light comes out of his chest and floats before him. Marshall now finds himself in front of that alien. Your friend is gone. Our connection is final. For the duration of your life, you are part of existence. But war is near for the Radiant. He will kill you and your entire planet. To die is to lose everything. Will you do all that is required? Will you take his life? The alien asks as it leans forward. Marshall nods. Yes, he says with determination, reaching out for the ball of light. Marshall sits by while the paramedics continue to work on Nathan, but there is no response. He finally gets up, rushing forward. Nathan, come on, man, this isn't it. It can't be, he shouts, falling to his knees, screaming in frustration. To everyone's surprise, Nathan suddenly gasps, taking a lungful of air, and the paramedics begin to shout, getting Nathan to an ambulance. Marshall stands there for a moment before rushing into a nearby alleyway. A bright flash of light can be seen, and radiant black leaps into the sky. Marshall, now the new superhero. He flies for a moment before finally slamming into the ground on a farm outside of town. He gets to his knees, shouting into the sky. I don't want it! Do you hear me? I don't want it! He shouts, but there's no answer, and he finally falls back to the earth, sitting there, just catching his breath. Later, he waits in the hospital, flipping through the internet, watching a podcast that badmouths Radiant Black for what happened. The battle between Black and Red, and the crumbling of an entire building, and how that battle put one guy in the hospital. Nathan's parents come in with Marshall jumping up trying to get news, learning that Nathan is hooked up to machines but he can't survive on his own. As the words flow over him, images begin to flash in his mind. The alien informs them that their sync is proceeding much faster than it did with Nathan. It explains that Marshall is now connected to all of existence. And once again, it warns him about a war that is coming, and Marshall nods. Okay, you know what? As cool as all of this cosmic stuff is, I really don't care right now. What I care about is finding the son of a bitch that put my best friend in a coma. You help me find the red bastard, and I'll do whatever cosmic stuff you want, deal? He says, anger in his voice rising. Meanwhile, Red is elsewhere, punching a hole in the ground, cursing herself for what she did. Stupid! Out of control! You wanted to handle it, you can't handle anything! She shouts. At least we agree on something! Black says over her shoulder, and she turns to see Marshall in shock. You're alive? She gasps, but the helmet disappears to reveal Marshall. No, he's in a coma because of you! Energy gathering in his hands, Red prepares for the attack, and the two rush at each other. The shockwave sends them both tumbling away, but Red can barely recover. Hey, eyes up! I'm not gonna do you like you did Nathan! Marshall shouts as he hits her again, hitting her with an energy blast that knocks her into the sky. He chases after her, hitting her again and again. I watched you back at the restaurant, absorbing stuff. Well, we screw with gravity. As long as I keep you in the air, you can't absorb shit! He says as he hits her again. She grabs him by the wrist. Let's find out! She says, absorbing the energy out of Radiant Black. His suit slowly pulling away. Damn it! Stop! He shouts at her, exploding and knocking her away from him, sending her crashing into the frozen lake below. Red stands up now, super armored. She punches Black again, sending him across the ice. Damn it! Black gasps as Red stomps on him, hitting him again and again, until his helmet begins to crack and anger flashes through his eyes as he fires off a blast of energy. Die! He screams out, the energy ripping through her as he pours it on, her armor ripping away, and Marshall realizing that he's blasting a woman. I just wanted to scare him! I didn't mean! She says, and Marshall stops his energy blast, staring at her. A light appears behind them, and both Radiant Pink and Radiant Yellow appear through the portal. Hey, sorry, really don't ever show up anywhere uninvited, but you're all in legit danger, Pink tells them. Wait, how many of you things are there? Marshall gasps, and the pair warn him, telling him that someone is coming. Someone that can counteract their powers. A flash of an energy blade rips through the group, dropping all of them to the ground. It hurts. I know. A consequence for playing with fire, the voice says as its owner materializes in front of them. You have something that is not yours. You will all lose your lives. Unfortunate but necessary. You have no choice but one. Will your planet die as well? The warrior asks all of the Radiants as he readies another attack. The warrior stands at the gathering of Radiance, and Marshall glares back at him. Look, right, the red one and I are kind of in the middle of something, so if you don't mind. But the warrior rushes forward, slashing the group, knocking them away. Everyone begins to open fire on the warrior, but the warrior twists out of the way, knocking them all aside. Red comes up behind him, trying to surprise him, but the warrior turns, punching her across the face. He leaps over to Black, bringing his sword down, but Black suddenly disappears into a pink portal. Marshall then falls out of the sky, landing in the crowded streets of Tokyo. We're in Tokyo? What the hell? He asks, turning to the group, and falls to the curb. Disoriented by the portal, he turns to Radiant Pink, thanking her for the save. You had the portal up your sleeve the whole time? He asks, and he's a little irritated as she waited so long to use it. Portal's teleporting, it's raining, man! I jumped from Sydney to Chicago and then to Tokyo, that's insane! Red steps forward, trying to calm everyone. Are we really doing this here? She asks, and Marshall whirls on her. Not a goddamn word out of you! You don't get to weigh in here! Yellow nods, explaining that they need to hurry, that the warrior has followed them through all of the previous jumps. And Pink agrees, telling the group that she just needs a quick rest. Take a break. Time to try something else, Marshall tells them, beginning to power up, but he turns to Red before they all begin to hover. This shit with you and me, it's not done. Not by a lot. He snaps, and with that, the group begins to glow, and Marshall lifts them all into the air. As they all begin to fly over Japan, Yellow explains that the warriors showed up a few days ago and began to attack them. Marshall asks Yellow and Pink where they're from, but Pink refuses to tell them. And dare I ask, what's your deal? Marshall asks Red. I didn't mean to hurt your friend. I was just trying to scare him. It's all you need to know. She tells him, and Marshall disagrees, but the conversation is interrupted as the warrior appears above them, slamming into Marshall, knocking him out of the sky. With his concentration lost, the rest of the Radiants all begin to fall, and Pink manages to open up a portal for Red and Yellow to drop into. She manages to grab Marshall out of the sky, teleporting them all away. With a crack of energy, the pair appear in space, and they float there for a moment before Pink begins to freak out. Oh my god, are we in space? Are we breathing? Can we talk? Can you hear me? She begins to shout out, and they both look up in surprise as they see a massive space battle going on, with ships exploding in bursts of light. Two large robot-like creatures suddenly turn to them, beginning to float forward. You have to teleport us out of here right now! Marshall shouts at Pink. She grabs her head. It's too far, she shouts, and the beings begin to get closer, with Marshall grabbing Pink's shoulders. All right, you gotta trust me on this or we're both dead. When I say now, you're gonna think of a Japanese forest, and I'm gonna hit you with everything I've got. Energy cracks around them, and the pair disappear, reappearing on solid ground, both happy and hugging over still being alive. Pink is shocked, asking what Marshall did to boost her power. Our black holes have training wheels on them. We've got some level ups for sure. The red one gave me a cape. It was totally dope, he tells her. I am so confused, she says with a smile. And Marshall agrees as he looks around, seeing that they are now in Russia. Wait, did you send us to Russia? Meanwhile, Yellow and Red have appeared in the snowy side of a Japanese mountain. Moving through the woods, Yellow believes that Ava took Black somewhere. The real conundrum is figuring out where our glitchy friend wound up before he can find us. He begins to say, and they both look up in shock as they find the warrior crumpled on the ground before them, his helmet cracked. Okay, I swear I didn't plan that, honest, Yellow says, and Red nods, noting that the warrior is breathing. Good. Let's get some goddamn answers. It was before that the warrior was floating in space, but he came to and floated towards an abandoned spaceship. Climbing aboard, he brought the ship online, turning and moving it through the vastness of space. Now, in Russia, a crowd has begun to gather, with Marshall looking at Ava, asking her to teleport them again, but she collapses to her knees, too tired to continue. Okay, got it. We go normal then, which means quick change, yeah? They both glow, returning to their civilian clothes, and he puts her arm around his shoulder, beginning to carry her away. Meanwhile, over in the woods, the warrior has been sealed by Red's abilities. He looks at Yellow and Red as he comes around. The respectful thing would be to immolate an atonement for your stupidity, syncing with that which you do not understand. What do you hope to accomplish by drawing out your deaths? The warrior asks them, but Yellow demands to know what they've gotten themselves into. You've marked your world. Your species will die. The warrior tells him. Who are you and where did you come from? Red asks, but the warrior's helmet begins to glow. Don't worry. Soon it won't matter. You'll all be dead. Thank you for the charge, he says, disappearing from his makeshift prison. Meanwhile, back in Russia, Ava and Marshall have managed to steal some coffees. They talk briefly about their experiences as Ava begins to ask about Nathan in the hospital. The two are then confronted by the people that they stole the coffees from, but since Marshall doesn't speak Russian, the pair stand. Feeling better? He asks Ava, and she nods, and they glow and transform. It's high time we interrupted the wooded weekend getaway, Marshall tells her as they begin to disappear. Meanwhile, over in the woods, the warrior is fast, hitting Yellow and Red hard, disappearing into the shadows and reappearing. He knocks Yellow away, stabbing Red in the chest, letting her fall to the ground, beginning to bleed out. She crawls across it, reaching for a tree to absorb and alter the material. Survival mode. Absorb to repair. Try to stop the loss of fluid. Clever, but too advanced. The warrior tells her, driving his sword once more into her chest. She gasps, but reaches out, grabbing the blade. Maybe. Just need to absorb something stronger. She gasps again. The warrior tries to pull away, but she stands, now heavily armored, punching him across the forest. Yellow stands by her side as the pair begin for the next round of fighting. The warrior stands, hitting a button on his arm, activating a massive explosion that rips through the forest, knocking the heroes away, creating a giant crater. At that moment, Ava and Marshall appear, with Ava rushing over to Yellow. Wendell, what happened? She asks, and he shakes his head. He charges his tech from us. We're powering him, Wendell says, realizing what's happening. They all turn as the warrior comes through the smoke of the explosion. A reductive understanding of the old ways and the new. You tempt fate! You dance among the world enders in the shadow of Armageddon! All the while unknowing to the extent that you are a mistake, an improbable accident, a doom on your planet! With that, he prepares himself, readying his weapons. The Radiants gather, Marshall in front. Let's go, Cosmic Slash. I am 001, marked for death by blah, now in service of the new way, the warrior tells them. And I'm gonna finish your axe if it's the last thing I do. Marshall snarls at him, but his chest begins to glow and a new voice echoes in the forest. No! The voice commands, a massive hand reaching out of Marshall's chest, spinning through the air and grabbing the warrior, pulling him in. The light in the hand suddenly disappear, and Marshall drops to the ground in shock. What was that? Ava shouts, and Wendell comes forward asking Marshall if he knows what happened. I didn't do anything. A giant goddamn robot stuck its arm out of my chest. It's been there the whole time? Wendell nods, telling him that if the threat is over now, they should all go home and get some rest. Hopefully, they'll be able to get some answers from the robots of existence later. Marshall nods, but begins to move towards Fred, interested in finishing their fight. But Wendell hits him with a blast of energy, knocking him down. All right, we're knocking this off right now. You two have problems, you got baggage, that sucks. It's also a part of life. And now, so is a permanent link to the black hole. There are far bigger fish out there that want us dead. He glares at Marshall for a moment before helping him to his feet. Ava is just happy that everything is over, teleporting them all away. Meanwhile, out in the desert, a group of mercenaries have found a strange vault. They finally get it opened to reveal the alien weapons within. The leader smiles as he steps forward. Looks like we're in business. The next day, Marshall wakes up in his apartment like any other day, going through his morning routine and heading to work. Once he gets to work, he hears his boss listening to a podcast talking about the Radiants, and he isn't happy about it, since they aren't saying the nicest things about him. At the end of the day, he heads to the hospital where he sits by Nathan's bedside telling him what's been going on and promises that they'll hang out when Nathan finally wakes up. Time keeps going on, with Marshall's days melting together in the same routine, with the same spots of him trying to act like a hero. A month passes, and one day Marshall is visited by Satomi, Radiant Red. She takes him out to lunch and tries to apologize for what happened to Nathan. Marshall starts to get mad as she tells him that she is just trying to scare Nathan into leaving her alone. I came to say I'm sorry, she finally says, and Marshall shakes his head, telling her that she'll have to do better than that. She's the one that put him in the hospital. So, the two of them eventually stand by Nathan's hospital room. Satomi steps forward to the man that she put into a coma. Hey Nathan, it's nice to meet you, she says quietly, and time passes with Nathan staying in his coma, while Marshall visited him every day. He continues to work, he continues to try and be a superhero, and he fights against the likes of Doppler, Shift, and the Armored Warrior, but everyone keeps bad-mouthing him. He finally has to go visit the makers of the Circle podcast, asking them to help him out by revamping his brand. How about instead of us being enemies, I'll give you access. We make some dope merch and everyone loves me again, and you stop bad-mouthing me on your podcast. The podcasters all stare at him for a moment. What's in it for us? Marshall explains that it's for a good cause. But the podcasters aren't so sure, pointing out that most of the new villains have only begun to appear since Radiant Black showed up on the scene. It's the old argument. A superhero arrives and the villains arrive to counter him. Marshall finally sighs. I'll give you a percentage and follow you on Twitter. It doesn't take long for the group to team up, promoting the podcast in the Radiant Black welcome box. More time passes and Nathan has been in a coma for almost a year now. On day 224, Marshall is sitting at the bar, trying to come up with an idea for the story that Nathan had been writing. And he looks up to see Nathan's spirit standing over him. Boo! Nathan says with a laugh and Marshall just stares. I'm dreaming, aren't I? 'Cause, yeah, this place was destroyed, Marshall says, looking around and realizing that he's in the very bar that was destroyed in the fight with Radiant Red. Yep, Nathan says with a sad nod, and he smiles at Marshall. I know you're hurting, but everything's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. I promise. Day 239, Nathan's mom calls with tears in her eyes. They're saying, it's time. Day 240, Marshall is drunk, angry and sad by the news, but a spectral hand falls to his shoulder. Do you want to go for a walk? Ghost Nathan asks him. And the two walk through the streets of their hometown, talking about life, until Marshall finally looks up and sees that he's at the hospital. Ghost Nathan isn't with him anymore, and he heads inside, heading to Nathan's room as the doctor is about to unhook him from the machines. Marshall watches in silence as the doctors begin to work, and he suddenly realizes something. Wait, put it back! He's still alive! I can save him! Marshall shouts as he goes rushing out of the room and running into the streets, shouting into the sky. He's alive! Isn't he? He screams, but the voice doesn't answer him. He realizes that his dreams of Nathan's spirit weren't dreams at all, that he's been a part of Marshall ever since he took the Radiance. But there's still no answer. Fine! I'll do it the hard way. Marshall says quietly, returning to the train tracks to the place where Nathan originally got the powers, and he stands on those tracks. He watches as a train is getting closer and closer. You don't want to talk? Cool, but I'm not getting off these tracks until we do, and if I die, that'll absolutely affect you. Maybe somebody worse than me bonds with this thing. He snaps as that train is barreling down upon him, and a light flashes, and a voice begins to speak to Marshall. Hello, Marshall. Marshall demands to know if it is possible to save Nathan. Existence informs him. It is, but you will not succeed. What does that mean? Marshall demands. There is only truth in existence. To attempt this will come at a great cost. Are you prepared to lose everything? Marshall doesn't hesitate. Let's go, he says, disappearing in front of the train. He falls through the sky, twisting and landing in his radiant armor, and he looks around at the strange world that is laid out for him. All right, I guess that this is the way, he says, running along a starry path and the dotted lines that appear on the ground. He stops at a strange wall with a large robot phasing through the wall and leaning down to look at him. Hello, Marshall. Welcome to existence, it says, holding out his hand. To reach Nathan Burnett, you must reach for the truth. There is only truth in existence, it says, and Marshall steps into its hand, and the robot puts him on his shoulder. It begins to walk through existence, informing Marshall once again that this attempt will come at a great cost. But Marshall doesn't care. Nathan is his best friend. He was supposed to be radiant black. Marshall will do anything he can to bring him back. The robot leads him into a strange crystal building, and inside of it is a black hole. The path to truth is indirect and fatal. The terrain is treacherous and fatal. Travel the helix. Through existence, you will find truth. If existence does not consume you first, it tells him as it lowers him to the ground. Wait, you're not coming? But the robot stands back up. I cannot follow beyond this place. Do not despair. You will surely die, but you will not be alone. Remember, Marshall, the only truth is existence. Marshall stares at it for a moment. Right, he says before turning back to the black hole, reaching out his hand and suddenly disappearing. Light and sound bleed together for Marshall as he is tugged away, and he suddenly appears again, shocked to find the warrior standing before him. Welcome to existence, 001 says. Marshall hits him with an energy blast, but the warrior quickly reappears, placing his blade to Marshall's throat. Your robot acquaintance did. Then we made a deal, he and I, 001 says. You are here to attempt the impossible, to navigate existence and retrieve your friend. When you fail, I will retrieve the Radiant, 001 tells him. He steps away, allowing Marshall to stand, and 001's helmet disappears, revealing an alien face. I have no interest in sinking, only protecting the Radiant. You have no hope in existence. 001 begins to lead Marshall through the realm of existence until they reach the sunless shore. Keep your wits. There could be all manner of. He begins, but the world blacks out for Marshall for a moment, and he shakes his head, bringing himself back. To stock before we go any further, 001 says, finishing a different sentence. They continue to walk, with 001 explaining that existence only cares about the truth. Sorry, I can't keep this straight. Are we talking about the idea of the place? Marshall asks him, but the voice calls out and Marshall turns. Hey, Marshall, Nathan says, standing on a cliff overlooking them, fire blazing around his body. Welcome to existence, Nathan says. But Marshall doesn't believe the specter. Nathan then explains that he isn't trying to trick Marshall, just to hope that appearing in this form will make Marshall listen. You're not ready to be here. This isn't going to end well. And if you must continue this path, I'll gladly take you. Just know, this will be a one-way trip, Nathan warns him. There's only truth in existence. But does the path lead to Nathan? Marshall asks, and Nathan peers at him for a moment. Yes, he finally says. That's all I need to know. Marshall says, firing a blast of energy at Nathan, destroying the rock. A moment passes, but existence begins to rumble, and the pair look up to see demonic creatures flying towards them. Access your second form. 001 orders, but Marshall can't do it at will, so the pair run. As a portal opens up, the two of them drop into it, and the two of them land in a new landscape, with Marshall looking up at a giant Nathan leaning over them. Jesus, he whispers. Hello, Marshall. We're learning so much about you, but our light has only started to reflect. Why are you here? You know why I'm here. I'm here to save my best friend, Marshall shouts back at the giant Nathan, but the giant Nathan stares. You're lying. Energy begins to gather around Marshall. Why would I be lying? He shouts, and the image of Nathan begins to waver. There is only truth in existence. It rumbles. Marshall has had enough, firing blasts of energy at the image. A massive fist flying out, slamming into the ground, knocking the pair apart. 001 throws down another portal, teleporting Marshall to safety, and then he leaps, opening fire on the giant. But it's not good. Marshall then appears again, a cape flapping behind him as he flies. Guess who got his cape back, he shouts, and energy gathers around him as Marshall flies forward, slamming his fist into the giant, flying straight through him. Another black hole opens up and Marshall is sucked into it, landing in another landscape. His body exhausted as he continues to move forward, searching for Nathan. A voice booms through the world, or maybe it is in his mind. Why are you here? There is only truth in existence. Why are you here? Something reaches out for Marshall, a swirl of light and color that grabs him. Show me, the voice demands, and Marshall falls to his knees in the black void with the voice demanding the truth, and he finally stops arguing. He deserves this, not me, Marshall says in defeat, and the voice demands to know why Marshall believes this. He tells the voice that Nathan was trying to be a better person, trying to chase a dream. Marshall admits that he hates what Nathan shows him is possible, but finally reveals the truth. I just hate myself, he says quietly, admitting that he is nothing. Colors swirl around him again, and Nathan appears, telling Marshall that he isn't nothing. Nathan tells him that they can go now, that the voice will allow them. Listen, Marshall, I've known you your whole life. You're enough. You're more than enough, and you've done some amazing things. You're on an adventure. Everyone goes on one. Yours is just different than mine. You can do this, Nathan tells him. Marshall looks at his friend. How could you possibly know that? He asks, and Nathan smiles. Because there's only truth in existence, he says, and the friends hug for a moment with the black hole opening above their heads. The suit appears around Marshall again, and he grabs a hold of Nathan, lifting them both into the sky, flying up into the light. Marshall is suddenly dropped into his apartment with a crack of energy, slamming into the coffee table, breaking it apart. Home, he groans. That's convenient, he says as he struggles to his feet, rushing out of the house, running to the hospital to find Nathan's room empty. Where is he? Marshall shouts to the nurse, and she points him to the rehab center. He's shocked to find Nathan is going about physical therapy. Well, look who it is, Nathan says with a smile, getting back into his wheelchair and wheeling over to Marshall. Dude, where have you been? Marshall is confused. What? Nowhere. I mean, I came straight here. But Nathan looks at him. Marshall, I woke up 6 weeks ago. Later, the two of them sit in Nathan's hospital room as Marshall scrolls through his phone and looks at all the news that he missed. The robot did say that time worked differently. He then looks up. Do you know about the glitchy guy or the other ones? Red's maybe not as awful as we thought. Pink's cool. Yellow sucks, Marshall tells him. But Nathan tells him that he doesn't want to talk about it and that he's just tired. Nathan's parents come walking into the room, and Marshall can tell that they're very angry at him for disappearing for so long after he rushed out of the hospital. And after they leave, Marshall realizes that no one knew where he went. So he rushes out of the hospital, and after a little bit of time, he stomps angrily out of his job, discovering that he had been fired for disappearing, and that everyone presumed he had just died. That's when there is a flash of light and a portal opens up over his head. Okay, totally sorry to interrupt your hissy fit, but is now maybe actually the perfect time for a killer job offer? Ava says as she pops her head out of the portal. She takes Marshall to lunch and the two of them find themselves eating heroes outside. Remember Doppler? She asks and Marshall nods and continues to eat. Ava tells him that the woman has been on a crime spree and that she wants Marshall's help to take her out, hoping that streaming it live will help get her subs on Twitch. We could introduce your character to the channel with a matchup against an old nemesis. We could live stream the whole quest, the search, the confrontation, the rehashing of old wounds. We can make the fight a Patreon exclusive, she says, and Marshall just keeps eating and nodding, only barely knowing what she is talking about. Meanwhile, Doppler has arrived at the Mercs that she rented her suit from, telling them that she needs a recharge. We were super clear that your rental only includes a 1 charge a month. The boss says, angry that she would just show up, but she shakes her head. Look, if you want me to pay you guys and my medical bills, I need working tech. She tells him, and he finally agrees, allowing her to charge, though the boss is still surprised that she can get the suit working when his men can't. That's because they only saw it as a weapon. What you built is so much more. The thing can modulate sound and transmute it into energies. You have to treat it like an instrument. She informs him, finally standing as the charge is finished. High up in the sky, Ava and Marshall are flying along, looking for Doppler, while Ava is live streaming. She mutes their mics, though, and asks about Nathan, excited that he woke up. Oh yeah, I woke him up. What? How? Ava asks, and Marshall just looks at her. If a robot ever invites you to existence, you should say no. I don't even know what that means, Marshall, she tells him. Later, the pair get pinged by the chat that someone is informing them that they spotted Doppler. Ava teleports them to the location, and they find the robber putting stolen money into her car. Hey, the possum watcher was right, Marshall says as they fly over to her, and Doppler whirls around on them. No, 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 she shouts. Funny how we keep meeting this way, Marshall jokes, but Doppler fires a sonic blast at them. The heroes dodge it, and the blast rips into a nearby building. No, I didn't mean, Doppler tries to tell them, but the heroes are busy pulling civilians out of the building, and when they're done, Doppler has already vanished. Yeah, but we got a lead, Ava says, checking the robber's car. They go through the car and discover that Doppler is a teacher named Anja Rongja. Check it out, Ava says, showing Marshall Doppler's tablet with a picture on it. What am I looking at? Marshall asks her, and then he looks at a picture of two guys in front of a rocket. Epic front. They're like a life hacker brand channel. They make videos to show you how to make things in your life more epic. She then points to the rocket, showing Marshall the strange symbols on it and how the rocket seems to be phasing in and out. Does that glitch remind you of anyone? A short time later, Doppler appears in front of the Epic Front warehouse again with the boss yelling for her to leave. The news is just one big look of you blowing a building up. He shouts at her, but she tells him that she doesn't even know how it happened, that it seemed like she was supercharged, sound waves emitted from her body. Wait, it's doing it again, she tries to tell them, but a light flashes and Ava and Marshall appear. Hey, Ava shouts, and the heroes rush at Doppler, but she fires blasts at Pink. Black manages to slam her into a large cabinet, knocking her to the ground, and the warehouse explodes beneath them, with the heroes turning to see a van speeding out of the explosion and rushing to them. Now you're gonna get it, Doppler laughs, but the van suddenly phases out and disappears itself. Wait, I did this all for you. I just wanted to play again, Doppler shouts in surprise, but Black comes up behind her, punching her hard, slamming her into the nearby wall. She collapses to the ground and begins to cry. Oh, well, now this doesn't feel right, Marshall says as he walks forward, but Ava isn't listening. All right, stream, justice served. That's it for me, Pinkies. Logging off, she says, and Doppler is begging Black to not hit her again. But he just motions her away. Go, stop breaking the law. Consider it a warning. He tells her, and even Pink is surprised as Marshall orders Doppler to leave and try to use her powers for good. I don't know about this, Ava says as they watch Doppler run off. But regardless of how Ava felt about how Marshall handled it, the two leap into the sky to return the stolen money. I hope that was the right thing to do. I mean, people deserve a second chance, she says, and Marshall nods. This feels right, and more, right feels hard to find. He tells her. Elsewhere, Nathan is leaning up in his hospital bed, closing his eyes, listening to music, when a voice fills his mind and he feels the robot. Hello, Nathan.
And that was Radiant Black. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, please be sure to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. We'll see you guys next time, right here. And of course, rest in peace, Benny. We really miss you.